realtor, restaurant specialist here in Delray Beach, South Florida. I'm just going to read this article. It's actually a bunch of quotes, but no holds barred. The RRF replenishment hopes were dashed recently. I'm a little behind the curve on this. This article is from the 19th, about 5 days ago. I'm just going to read it. The U.S. Senate failed to advance the Small Business COVID Relief Act of 2022, ending the possibility of replenishing the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. Throughout the pandemic, restaurants, this is a quote from Michelle Korsmo, President and CEO of the National Restaurant Association. Throughout the pandemic, restaurants focused on serving their communities. When government-mandated closures shuttered dining rooms, restaurants found a way to shift operating models and keep employees on the payroll. I would like to think that the Supper Club has something to do with that and all the great folks around the South Florida area that participated. When first responders needed a hot meal, restaurants stepped in to help in cities and towns across the country. When Congress offered these restaurants the RRF Lifeline, restaurant owners and operators made business decisions based on those commitments. Restaurants that are still trying to make up for what was lost in the pandemic today are struggling with workforce shortages, record high inflation, and supply chain constraints. Today's vote will further exacerbate those challenges and will result in more economic hardships for the families and communities across the country that rely on the restaurant and food service industry. Today, a Senate filibuster dashed the promise made to more than 177,000 small business owners in the communities across the country. This is Sean Kennedy, Executive Vice President of Public Affairs for the NRA, the National Restaurant Association. These restaurant owners believe the creation of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund was a down payment and that the Senate would complete the mission with this vote. A bipartisan majority voted to begin debate on this critical legislation, but it wasn't the 60 votes needed. While there are valid questions about government spending and inflation, restaurants should not be caught in the crossfire. What did we give out? 90 billion to the Ukraine so far, 100 billion. We applaud the leadership of Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, as well as Senators Ben Cardin, Roger Wicker, and Kirsten Sinema for their work in creating and pressing to replenish the RRF. For those keeping score, those were 3 Democrats and 1 Republican. The $48 billion Small Business COVID Relief Act of 2022, introduced by Senators Ben Cardin, who was a Democrat, and Roger Wicker, who was a Republican, included $40 billion for RRF replenishment and $8 billion in support for other industries that were deeply impacted by the pandemic. The House passed the Relief for Restaurants and Other Hard-Hit Small Businesses Act of 2022. Yes, that is the name of the bill. That included $42 billion to replenish the RRF on April 7th. Both political parties agreed that the RRF should be replenished but couldn't reach a consensus on how to pay for it. Democrats generally wanted to treat replenishment as emergency spending, while Republicans generally wanted existing funds reallocated. 90 billion, I think we gave them to the Ukraine so far. The American Rescue Plan established the RRF with 28.6 billion that Senator Majority Leader Charles Schumer called a down payment to restaurants. More than 278,000 restaurants applied for funds, but only 101 applications were funded before the Small Business Administration ran out of funding. By leaving 177,000 without aid, the federal government essentially picked winners and losers among direct competitors based on chance, not need. The program's initial round of funding, which operators used primarily to pay off debt and meet payroll, a lot of that debt was rent. For those who don't realize it, a lot of restaurants got their rent furloughed, basically. So you still had to pay your rent, you just didn't have to pay it the first 6 months. They took your rent, they broke it up into 3 chunks and put it on 3 months later on. There was no, a few people forgave people. I know a friend of mine in LA who had a lot of his rent forgiven, but a lot of the rents out there were not forgiven. They were simply furloughed or moved to backloaded onto other months. 900,000 restaurant jobs were saved with the funds from the RRF, and 96% of recipients report that the funds helped their establishments remain open. But those that did not receive funds are still languishing, if they're even around. In fact, 62% of operators say their restaurants accumulated additional debt since the beginning of the pandemic. 57% said their restaurants fell behind on expenses. Industry-wide, eating and drinking establishments lost $300 billion in sales in the first year of the pandemic. Local restaurants across the country expected help, but the Senate couldn't finish the job. This is from the IRC, Independent Restaurant Coalition. I'm going to move on. I'm just going to give you guys some numbers here. At least 90,000 restaurants and bars have closed since the beginning of the pandemic. Almost 300,000 restaurants applied for RFF grants in 2021, but nearly 200,000 restaurants did not receive funding, so only 1/3. 52% of which reported that they are on the verge of permanent closure if the RRF is not replenished. 90 senators voted to create what became the Restaurant Revitalization Fund last February. Earlier this week, Chow Now Toast and over 20 other businesses and trade associations penned an industry letter urging Congress to act quickly so that the tens of thousands of independent restaurants that did not receive relief could keep their doors open. They warned Congress that as many as 4 in 5 restaurants and bars are in danger of closing permanently, threatening the livelihoods of farmers, bakers, and thousands of employees. A recent IRS survey of nearly 1,000 members of the independent restaurant and bar community in 48 states found that more than half of the businesses did not get RRF grants and will close within 6 months. The survey responses also demonstrate how businesses in desperate need of relief would use RRF grants to pay down debts, raise wages, make repairs, and moreover, keep their businesses open. So here we go. 86% of restaurants reported that a grant would allow them to be able to hire more staff. 77% of restaurants reported that a grant would allow them to pay their rent. 48% of restaurants without federal grants reported are in danger of defaulting on a loan, compared to 22% of businesses that received RRF. 40% of restaurants without federal grants reported are in danger of filing for bankruptcy, compared to 25% of restaurants that received the RRF. 83% of restaurants reported that a grant would allow them to increase their wages. 44% of restaurants reported that a grant would allow them to expand their menu. 51% of restaurants reported that a grant would allow them to expand outdoor dining options. And 91% of restaurants reported that a grant would allow them to withstand rising food costs without significantly increasing menu prices. I've been saying for a while now that with all this price volatility, margins are being squeezed for restaurants. Margins for restaurants are around 6% on a dollar. That means 6 cents of every dollar is actually quote unquote profit. That number is being squeezed even harder right now. So I don't know about you, but when I read this article that hit my mailbox this morning, it infuriated me a lot, especially when I watch the news and I see the money that's flying out to do all these different things out there. The small businesses, as I've always said, are the backbone of our society, and restaurants are one of the last bastions of small businesses in our country that's really left right now. The hardware stores have become Home Depots, and it's almost every industry has been affected by conglomeration. Restaurants are one of those, I don't know about you, but I enjoy an independent restaurant. I'm not saying there aren't good chain restaurants out there. I'm just saying I enjoy going to a restaurant and knowing the owners, that the money I spend there is going to go to put a pair of dance shoes on someone's daughter that is going to go then take dance lessons at another local business, and then that local business is going to help feed another local business, keeping our money local. So just thought I would update everybody on this. I'm not sure if it's on your radar or if you saw it. I basically missed it myself. I think Philip Hawkins posted about it. But there we go, man. That's what's going on right now for our restaurants. So we will see what the future will hold.